This week in hospitality marketing, live show number 443. I am your host, Lauren Gray. Thank you so much for accepting our slight delay in our technology today. It's Groundhog Day. Something's going to be weird. Happy Groundhog Day. One of my all-time favorite movies, actually. And as you read more of the history behind the movie and so forth, and what they thought it was going to be versus what it ended up being, and so forth, it's a classic. It's referred to in context all the time. There's one-liners out of it. There's two things that I learned out of Groundhog Day. One, don't drive angry. For those that know the movie, you know what I mean when he was having the groundhog drive the car. Anyway, and the second is, and this is our topic today, actually, is repetition training. Training gets you to get it right. You can't do something without failing, and you can't, or not to learn from it anyway, and you can't do something you've never done before if you don't keep trying to make it better than the first time you did it. I know it sounds a little convoluted to say that, but so topic today, happy Groundhog Day, and how training makes revenue. Repetition is one thing, training is another. Both of them have value. Both of them we'll discuss in the context of marketing today, and how you create and go towards things. There's a good and a bad part of this discussion. You can train bad habits, which actually are even easier than training good habits. Habits are the ability to do it by memory. Now, for athletes, there's some numbers that they talk about how many times a physical motion has to happen before it becomes muscle memory, meaning that when you instigate the motion, your body is remembering it. It's more deeply in your pattern of action because you've done it so many times that it's by muscle memory is the coined phrase for it. We do good versions of that and bad versions of that. For instance, one of the biggest things that I point out to myself, this is self I says, procrastination. Procrastination is a skill that is learned. It's reinforced by repetition and it's reinforced by consistency. Having been able to squeak by putting something off or having something work out better because you put it off validates well, let's just wait and see, or I'll get to that later. Right now, it doesn't seem to be the thing I need to do most, or if anything at all. It has its good and bad as well, but procrastination in general is not good because a lot of times you miss windows of opportunity because you've delayed what you were planning on doing or acting on something that you see. That happens a lot with data and the interpretation of data and the understanding of data. Some of that gets caught up with the politics of how people receive what you're about to say and so forth. But good habits versus bad. Bad habits. Repetition for the purpose of repetition without really having a clear purpose as to why you keep doing it the same way. Translation, why do you have that report? Why do you look at the report? Or why don't you look at the report? Why is the time being spent generating the report? What is the value of that? That's a repetition bad habit. By the same token, if you're wanting to go do something, and this is when all of this is calling the kettle black for what it is. I'm in the frying pan, so to speak. And that is the fact that when I do something or we do something, we choose whether or not it is to do it at that time. The idea that we've done it that way, we're comfortable doing it that way, we're persistent about doing that way, and therefore we do it because it's muscle memory, for like mental muscle memory, that we've always done it that way, so therefore it continues to be done that way. We look for the same things, the same triggers. As humans, we're creatures of habit, and in order to assimilate all the things that are going on in our world, we mentally categorize them according to familiarities that we've had for them. And as such, we do the same with our marketing and reporting. It's self-fulfilling that if we create a campaign targeted to a certain group of people and we produce something from it, and for whatever KPI, maybe a bad KPI, we've attained that goal, we feel that that is a success ratio. What we did produced what we expected. The problem is that volume of business that may have been attained is insignificant to the amount needed, or it just was a mediocre solution that succeeded compared to a better solution that would have been far exceeding what we had actually gotten from our plan. That a lack of looking at other things is a huge element to the process of training. Training isn't just about repetition of a single thing to best refine how to do it. That's repetition. Training is the expansion of understanding, the progressive growth of taking what you have learned and apply it to something you haven't learned so that it becomes inclusive of what you've learned and it keeps growing from there. That's learning. Repetition is to perfect a function or motion or activity that you repetitively do. You aren't necessarily learning from it anymore as you are perfecting its process. A lot of times we look at repetition as a learning, as a training, and it's not. It actually it is a learning. Excuse me for saying that, but it's not training. Training is taking what you're doing and then using it in another way that you haven't used it before. I say that from a marketing perspective that we get into what we're allowed to do, what we're good at doing, and what we're comfortable at doing. And in marketing, if you're comfortable in paid advertisement, you're comfortable making ads, you're comfortable making campaigns and things like this, you'll tend to magnet towards that. We all magnet towards our skill set. Strangely, when I was in food and beverage and owned restaurants and ran restaurants and food and beverage directing operations for hotels and so forth, I always found Zen-like solstice in the dish station. I enjoyed, after pulling off a massive banquet, thousands of people, whatever it is, that I would go help in the process of breaking down everything. So I'd go help the dish. Now I followed the flow of business. For anybody that's unfamiliar with restaurants and so forth, there's a flow of business that goes on. You have the need to help your front door because the people coming in the door, they need to get seated. Then you help your service staff in getting the service to the tables as quickly as possible. You help your bar staff with the bar drinks. Then you move into the kitchen where all the orders have gone in and you begin to expedite and or helpfully cook and or helpfully do whatever is necessary to get the food out as efficiently as possible. And then the cycle goes to going back onto the floor and helping your team on the floor clear plates, make sure that everybody's being taken care of, so forth and so on. And then you're helping them at the register to make sure that everything's getting cashed out correctly and so forth is done as quickly, as efficiently as possible. As a manager, you're the plug-in value source for all of that. And then towards the end, as all of this is coming in, the dishes are going in the back, then the dish machine people, they're overwhelmed with everything. There's certain places that are juxtapositions of everything. The bar isn't it. The bar shares the demand with food. The kitchen is one of those focal points. All food comes through it, but because there's drinks that it doesn't handle. But the dish place, the dish station handles everything. Not all the bar glasses, but most of the bar glasses. But all the dishes and plates and so forth. And then they're also responsible for the complete cleanup afterwards as well. I mean, yes, your cooking crew handles their stations and so forth, but the dish crew are the ones that handle all the trash bins and the general cleaning of the places and so forth and so on. So my point being, I found solstice in going to the dish machine. It was a very Zen-like experience. Dirties, prep, machine, close, wash, continue the first process, pops out, takes, racks, stacks. It's a nice, methodical, repetitive process. I could fly with the best of them. I could be ramma-jamming. I had ways of efficiently racking glasses. I have efficient ways of putting plates and racking and stacking plates and stacking plates and plate carts and so forth. You get better and better and better at the repetition. That is repetitious learning. That is getting better at doing the same things in a more efficient means. That's taking something that's been successful and improving upon it. Training, the ability to learn something, requires a consistent, persistent growth of what you've taken and acquires a skill that you can repetitively do, and then use it to do a new skill that you haven't done until it also is repetitively good, and so forth. Now, I'm not here to doctor the ideas of how to turn and train. I want to translate that to our marketing strategies. Training comes from a lot of varieties. Training comes from the ability to expand what you're doing with what you have available, looking at ways to do things that you haven't looked at before, getting away from your comfort zone of what you're familiar and comfortable with, and getting into areas that you need to progressively learn to do better at, even if it's just an awareness of this. I had a recent discussion with a friend of mine, and we were talking about their success as to why they're so good at what they do. And it's because they're multi-skilled. They have a variety of history of their work. I like to equate it to a liberal arts degree versus a particular major degree. Coming from a liberal arts college, I'm biased to thinking liberal arts is the cool way to go. You're exposed to a variety of mindsets, philosophy and art and economies and businesses and sociology and all these various things that you're required to at least sample, go and take certain amounts of classes in different areas other than the discipline you've chosen. And the purpose of it is to give you a broader perspective of what you have chosen to do. If you chose to be an accountant, you're sitting there go, why do I need to know about philosophy? Well, actually, strangely enough, it's funny how the world comes full circle. It's like saying when you went into high school, why did I learn algebra? And you find out that you end up tending to using it a lot more than you planned in life. The variety of skills that are needed made this person successful what they do. They were finding frustration of trying to find, unless they did what they did well, they couldn't really hand it to another person to do it as well as they would want them to do it themselves. And that created a paradox for them. They're overworked. They looked at everything as being everyone around them as being a support system for them, um, rather than a viable resource to regulate to. Like, okay, you can help me with the easy stuff. You can help me with the stuff that if it fails, I can come and fix it for you. Um, that kind of regulation. What they didn't realize is that by doing that, the people began to understand them better, and they realized that they were being handed not the important stuff, so they weren't feeling trusted. Also, too, you were only giving things to people based on the set that you thought that they had, and that is they're good at this, so let me see if they can help me with this. Um, the best way to create an expansion of support around a person that's multifaceted is to recreate the multifaceted skill that you learned for them. The example I gave was if you have a good team member that is comfortable in the marketing space, say for instance, just like the example I gave about paid campaigns and creating Google accounts and running campaigns and looking at them and knowing how to function in that space, and they're very comfortable with it. How good are they at the revenue management aspect of the industry that what they do has an impact on? Are they fluent enough in it? Now, a lot of times they may be aware of the discipline. They may be aware of some of the factors in the discipline, some of the data that they provide to the discipline, and so forth and so on, but they don't understand how the discipline works. How does revenue managers do their job? So a lot of times, and a lot of things I've suggested to people is let them try it. One of the best things I did as a general manager at a hotel was I would have swap your job day. And what that was is people in departments had to work in another department for a full day. Now, granted, it was cultured, and we didn't give them the full brunt of good luck. We're counting on you, and just threw them to the wolves. They were mentored. They had a partner. They were given things to do. Okay, that were usable for somebody that didn't have the immediate skill to do them. Like they would help with ready set rooms, and they would help with cleaning rooms, but they weren't the ultimate final one to do the room. They were doing it with a trained professional, one of the supervisors, most probably all the time, to give them a sense of what the job entailed. What this did was it created a better understanding of what the people in that department did. Also created a good empathy as to what their daily routine and the things that affect their day were like. And overtly towards this purpose, it also allowed them to realize what they did in their regular job, how it affected these people in their job. And because of that, they did better at their job knowing how it affected others. And as they went through this circuit, we rewarded them with a recognition on the lapel that they could wear a pin that they went through this program. And you looked at those people and they wore them proudly because they had gone through these variations. Imagine an engineer behind the front desk. And imagine an engineer behind the front desk where a guest comes up and is telling you about some issue and problem with their room. And the engineer knows exactly why that's the issue and knows that it's yet to be fixed. But seeing how the desk attendant had to handle the dialogue with that person, the frustrations, the issues. The desk person can't fix the issue. They have to placate the guest as to the problem that the issue created for them, and all that process. And then they realize now that they have an influence in their job to make these events not happen again. So it created a better understanding, which also, and I found this to be a huge value, as we, and I've talked about this on the show many times before about this circle of conversation that went on the back of the hall, as we were tackling the life's daily issues of running a hotel. Now you had more broad, expansive understanding of all the people around you. So as I mentioned in the examples I always do, I'm talking to a banquet team about a particular banquet issue. A houseman comes up because he has a houseman issue, but he's now part of the circle of dialogue as we're walking down the hallway, and he's listening to the conversations, and he suggests something about our catering, banquet issues, and no one looks at him like, "Hey, you're a houseman. Why are you giving us a suggestion?" They listen because all of us have touched every one of the other departments at that point, and so their opinion actually had more weight than just a team member's opinion out of something they didn't know about. They had an exposure to what the banquet team does, and their insight was, okay, so let's see, does that make sense? Great suggestion, thank you. How can we help you now? That ability to disseminate skills to other people, allow them the variance. And I would say one other thing with this when it comes to training people Trust them to fail. There is a difference between handing over responsibilities to someone that they know are not priorities in your mind, in the sense if they fail, it's not a serious repercussion. And two, they understand that they're not being trusted with something that you can't come in and fix should it fail. I often talk about this from owning restaurants where, um, having managed restaurants up to the point where I got to own them. When I had my first restaurant and I handed the keys over to my first manager I hired, and I was very happy about who I hired and so forth, was that weird twisty time in my stomach. I know what it cost me to get there. I know how much I spent for this stuff. I know every piece of equipment's value and what I had to do to get it. I mean, anybody that's opened a restaurant, you walk around, you can tell the story of every piece that's around and everything where you got it and why you did what you did and all the crazy stuff. And here I'm handing the keys to literally a stranger, for lack of a better way of saying it, who now has the ability to have access to all of this stuff without me around and do what I probably did as a manager, where I had an extra couple of sandwiches or drank a couple extra beers at the end of the shift or whatever, knowing that was going to happen. Not that I had a problem with it and actually talked about it and talked it through. So it was the exploitation of that, the vulnerability of handing that over. That vulnerability is what holds a lot of us back with our teams and training. Is we will hand over, and trust too, by the way, we'll hand over what we are not vulnerable to fail with. Like if it fails, either we can fix it before it's discovered as failed, or if it fails, the repercussions is not as profound. To really build a good team, you need to have that risk. Okay. When I talk about what I do now, is there was a difference between me doing the direct work every day, all day, and then as I had my support team around me, and I would be giving them more work to do and ad hocs. It was nice that I was keeping up. So if they couldn't get done what I had promised the client, I could still fill it in. Then it got to the point where there was so much going on that what I gave to them to do, if it failed, I couldn't get in there in time. And then I got to the point where I wasn't keeping pace with all the newness because there's just so much stuff going on. You can't keep up with everything that's going on at the front edge level. Things have to balance. There's just too much going on in the world to keep up with everything. And so you begin to trust that they're doing stuff that you're not completely fluent in anymore. And that vulnerability is a training for yourself, and it's a training for them, because then they feel trusted. They know they're doing something that is out of your realm of actual over. There's no safety net now. They're on the high wire by themselves. If they fail, they fall. And that trust and that vulnerability solidifies their value to you as a team member. It's a transition of leadership that goes on, and training is so critical to that. So why does training make revenue? Because training gives you confidence. Training gives you skills that you feel better about knowing, and it gives you the insight to look and make questions that you didn't have before. If you don't know about paid campaigns, you don't feel smart enough to ask questions. I find that persistently in the presentations I give and the conferences I go to and the meetings that I'm asked to oversee and so forth, I get three types of questions. What I call the bold and the beautiful. There's somebody like me sitting in the front row that raises their hand as soon as I'm giving a pause long enough to ask a question. The hand's up. I love that. That's me. And I love asking questions. Then you have the person, and this is the second category, that won't ask in front of others because they don't feel it's a worthy question, and or they feel that they're in a realm of uncertainty, that by asking the question, it may weaken them in the pseudo political peer issues that exist in groups. That they asked a dumb question. It lowers people's perspective, or at least they're worried about that. And then there's the people that want to be very specific about their questions, don't want that information to be in front of others, that want to pursue you after the presentation to ask that question. All of that's good. All of them have their place. Sometimes an open question in an open forum is not going to get the best answer, because it has to be neutralized based on the full audience, not just the single person asking the question. So the third type of question is the best. A one-on-one, you're asking a question, I give you a very specific answer. By the same token, some questions need to be asked to be confrontational and or clarification, that have to be, why is this? When is this? So forth, so that everybody can hear the common answer for a good question. I like that one because that's the one I tend to gravitate towards. I like being in the front rows. People know me. Raise my hand as soon as I can. All said and done, all of that is training. How does it make revenue? Well, if my marketing person can understand better what my revenue person is doing, they can tailor more of the data that they have, or more of the things that they're discovering, or more of the things that they can see now through the lens of what revenue would potentially need it for. And contribute to the revenue manager. Hey, by the way, I was noticing this. There's a trend down on these ad sets, this geography or this demography or whatever it is, or this promotional code. Is that what you were pacing and planning for? I know we talked about it and you were expecting it to land at a certain level, but I don't think on the current trend it's lasted long enough that I have a concern about it. I'm going to look and see if there's other variations we're doing, or is it something you're really, we can just, accept as being a trend down or whatever. But that conversation wouldn't happen if the marketing person wasn't more familiar with the revenue person, and vice versa. The revenue person was more familiar with what the marketing person can provide for them. But it does bring up two other points I'd like to make about in this discussion of how training makes revenue. You should always have a plan B. I like to think of it as plan B is for better. You have a plan A, which is your best, and then you have a plan B, which is better. Take it whatever way you want to, whether B is better than A or whether B is just better compared to best. Anyways, the plan B is, should things not be going the way you expect them, should variances that you didn't account for have an effect, or variances that you accounted for but the variances changed in their impact, whatever that variation is, that you have an alternative idea, or at least a modality of determining what an alternative plan is. Even if you don't have a full second round of plan B for everything, at least you have a sense of, if these things happen, this is what we're going to look at, or how we're going to evaluate the things to go to the next alternative to what we're doing. This is critical, and you can't do this without training. Because if you stay within what you're comfortably knowledgeable about, as the adage goes, if all you have is a hammer, then everything begins to look like a nail. And that one tool can't fix all the things that need to be fixed. You need other tools. I've told this story before. I'll tell it again because it's applicable now. With my front desk teams, whenever they were able to successfully solve a guest issue that they had, I applaud them, I rewarded them, I thanked them, and I told them, don't use it again. And they would look at me really strange, like, why? That's a perfect fit. This happens, this is a solution. Yes, until it isn't. Because if every time this problem comes up, you think this is the only solution, there will time that this problem will come up and that solution is not going to fit. And you have no plan B. You have no other alternative. So find another way to solve the same problem. It might be as good, it might be better than what you first came up with. Might be not as good, but at least you have alternatives. So you begin to build this toolkit. That toolkit comes from the fact that it trains them to understand that not every problem has only one solution. Take it this way from a revenue management perspective. When I was running hotels in the Keys, we had a massive walk-in rate. Almost half of our daily business, 48% of our daily business, was walk-ins. At first, it was a nail-biting frustration from the history of hotels that I came from, where I'm used to channel segmentations, contribution of types of business, and literally in the morning, I'm sitting at 35-40% occupancy and not worried about it, because at the end of the night, I'm at 90, 95 or 100% closeout, because everybody mysteriously came down to the Florida Keys thinking that it was just hotel rooms. Show up and there's always a room. So what the real need was, the point of bringing this up, was we had to have a strategy of how to hit our ADR. If you're a front desk person at one of the hotels I had, it's real easy. You know the routine. They what they do is they come down and they'll hit the first hotel they see that they think they like. They'll go in and they'll get sticker shock because the rates are much higher than they anticipated. And they thought, why is it so? There's all these hotels. Why is this so expensive? So then they wave their hand. They go to the next hotel and they find the rate being similar to it. And they might do 2 or 3 of these. I had people, because we were in Key Largo. We were one of the first places they started pinballing like this. And they would come in and be like, "Oh my God, that's crazy! Can't you cut that in half?" No, it's the price. Well, and I said, we get to the point where we tell people, it's like, look, here's what's going to happen potentially. You're going to continue to drive down the road, and you're continually going to hear these rates. And as you go farther south, the rate's going to start going up because you're going closer towards Key West, and you're also at the fringe of what they know you've been traveling down from, and they realize that they can ask for more price because your only other solution is either to accept the price or go farther north again, which is farther away than where you're trying to get to. So you can do that, and I'll see you in about an hour. Or you can realize that this rate is the better rate to get now, and then start your day earlier, have a wonderful breakfast with us, head down the road and go to enjoy your vacation. The me doing that is fine. Having a desk agent which is being berated by people, they're mad, they're tired, they just got there, they flew in and they got their rent a car and they're going to the keys and then they're hitting it up with, some young behind the desk person is telling them it's some incredibly high rate or something. I said, here's what we do. And this is the training process to it. We want this ADR for this night. Now we have these many rooms left. So I take the number of rooms and say, this is what you can sell. You have these many rooms at the low rate that is easy. They'll sign on the dotted line as soon as you tell them the rate. Okay. You have these many rooms at this rate. Okay. That they're going to be hesitant, but they know it's a better rate than what they were just quoted. Then you have the rates that were quoted. Okay. That they will hum and haw, and they're going to ask you for a lower rate, which are the other two categories we just talked about. Then you have rates that are the ones I want that are higher than that. Okay, that you're not initially going to talk to because the rate you're going to offer them is the top rate. If you sell 4 of those, then you have this many more to sell of these. So get the painful ones out first. If you sell more of them, I'll bonus you. If you can raise my ADR for the day based on your ability to convince front desk attendees that this is the rate and you can steadfast to it and they're not going to run out the door. I said, but here's the deal. You're on a time clock. Up until 8 p.m., these rates are available for you to use, the top end rates, the quote the high rate and then the next rate if you want to step down from it kind of thing. By 9 o'clock, this is the rate quote. Shed the top 2. I don't want them to leave the door. By 10 p.m., you offer them whatever rate, not below this amount, that will get them to stay. Okay? That training process of showing them proportional values of rates and so forth. I still have front desk people that were with me that are now doing much more greater grandiose things. Talk about that time was their first exposure to rates and inventory that they understood. They knew that if they could get certain number of rooms at a higher rate, it made it so much easier and much more comfortable for the very tired bunch of squealy kids, fatigued out, come into the lobby. First they're happy that there's occupancy, and then to find out that they can get a decent rate. I said, it's up to you. I trust you. If you have a family that looks, honestly, you can say the high rate, but you can tell that high rate is probably not something that they can afford. They're on their trade. Get them in a place. I want to make them happy. I want them to come back again. Lifetime value we talk about a lot. But the idea of this is part of the training that makes revenue. Because as you train your team to understand why you're asking them to do the way they're doing, give them the tools to learn how to do it, give them the exposure of all the supporting cast and team members around them to understand how they relate to them and understand the depth of what they can do. Why, it's that they're just not being handed down these numbers from somebody that apparently knows something they don't. Teach them why you are making these numbers. Take the time to show them how you figured this out. Show them why it's a value. Answering the why question is incredibly important when it comes to dealing and talking with people in a training environment. The why is the critical component. The how is a critical component. You can go through all the stages of the questions, but the idea is that they're not just doing it because you told them. They're not just doing it because they trust that some mysterious thing and hand them this little black box that they use. It's them understanding the process. At first, it is just that, but the next step of it is then how do they begin to assimilate that data? Because you want them to progress in their knowledge. The larger they grow their training, the larger they grow their knowledge base. They take what they know and apply it to what they don't and become that knowledgeable about it and take that and expand to the next and the next and the next. That training process is incredibly valuable to you. So what happens? In the reality of things, we've created a gap in our industry. And you've heard me whine about this before. When we did the COVID lockdown, a lot of people that were in skilled positions, and I even questioned their skill level back then even, they left the industry and they left a void. And what happened was a lot of companies needed somebody to fill that role that wasn't completely skilled and trained to be in that role. But because they were willing to accept lesser pay and they were dual tasking and they'll take their old job and bring it up to the new job because, hey, they just needed a person to handle all of the sales department. And they were one salesperson out of 4 and the director of sales is gone. So that one person is now all of sales and we'll call them the director of sales. And then as business began to come back, they were sitting in that chair. They were still getting a lesser rate. So you started hiring underneath of that person. But the problem was that person was never skilled in the role. They were never trained. And now they're past the point of being able to ask those kind of basic questions because they're in the role. Those questions are below their title and stance. So now they're sitting in this vacuum of gap, of not knowing what they should know to be good at what they're being that they have a title for. That gap bubble is continuing with us, and it's going higher up into our food chain because by deference, companies operate. Well, they've been the director of sales and marketing over there, for 4 years. Let's move them up. Then we'll give them a lower rate because we gave them their first opportunity, so that we'll keep moving them up. That's what we do. The problem is they bring their ignorance up in the level with them. Next time you have people that are making very high level decisions for a company that don't have the full toolkit. They have just the hammer. They don't have the pliers and screwdrivers and stuff. And they're applying the one things that they know or the comfort zones that they know to that thing all the time, or they act like they're knowledgeable of something that they're not, and they make bad decisions because they don't understand all the things that they should understand to make that decision as good as possible for the company. So with that, you should always have an ongoing training program, which inherently is the first thing that gets hacked on a cutting down budget. If you're not hitting goals and forecasts and so forth, what gets taken is things like trade shows and training and things that help the team and invest in the team and the training. And the other thing that goes negative against training is it's perceived as a lost investment, because companies feel that the more they train up broad skill, better at, rather than specific to their company, the more they make the person marketable to jump and go to another place that would be more for money or more for whatever. The value to that, and we've had these discussions about AHR and so forth for a long time, is that you need to understand your motivations of your team. If it's money, it's money. If it's self-fulfilling happiness of what they do, or if it's culture that they want or whatever, identify what it is that keeps them with you, not hold it as ransom that they just don't train them. Society in history has always tried to subjugate other societies by restricting their abilities to do things, restricting their knowledge, restricting their freedoms. I'm not trying to equate it in any skill to that, but it's a skill that is learned in our society, that better to keep them doing what they're doing and not trying to make them better than what they could be. On the contrary, in fact, I just told the story to a friend a while ago, when the same hotels in the Keys, where I had this wonderful, and still had wonderful, teams of people that were Hispanic. And I don't speak Spanish. I've tried so hard. It doesn't work for me. Language bounces off my head. Fortunately, my wife is very, very good at language, and she teaches Spanish. She's taught Coast Guard down in Spanish and so forth. Anyways, so I went over, and in order to better create this collaboration I've been bragging about, where housekeeping understands engineering, engineering sounds for desk, so forth and so on, is I needed them to speak more English. I can't speak Spanish, although I always keep trying. And by the same token, I was trying to have where we would teach Spanish to English as well, both sides of the conversation. What we quickly found out is a lot of these people that were working in housekeeping, that was the only job they could really get. They were, from where they came from, much more higher skilled people, doctors even. But because of the language barrier, they weren't able to do what they were trained or better skilled at. This is all they could do. So as we're teaching them English, a lot of them, once they get really good with English, would go, and I remember this to the day, it's like they would come in the office and they were very nice. And actually you get to be very endearing to, if you have a good team culture thing, everybody is everybody. It's that thing. You just can't explain what it's like to work in that environment where everybody is in sync together, working together. It's a wonderful, that's the things I probably say I miss out of anything I can say I miss about running hotels, is what I'm trying to describe right now, that joy of collaboration. I remember them coming into the office. There was 4 of them, and they were happy, but they were sad. And they said, "Look, we found something to do." And I said, "Oh, did I do something wrong?" No. They were talking about the fact they were able to, because of now being better at English, they've been able to take care of some things, and they've been given opportunities to get more back into their field that they had been previously trained in, and that they were going to pursue that. And they're very appreciative for what they've had the opportunity to do, and of course learning the use of it. And I'm like, oh wow! And the first time this happened, I was like, oh my god, what did I just do to myself? And now I have a gap of all these people that I really truly, they do wonderful work and everything else, and that's right, off they go. Instead, they introduced me to 4 other people that were equally as wonderful, that were looking for the opportunity that they were given to be able to work. And we started the process all over again. The company I worked for at first was very upset with me because of this. They're like, "Why are you teaching no the English? Because it's just going to go." First off, our service scores went through the roof. Our community, our culture was just absolutely one of the most endearing cultures I've ever had. Um, Everything was wonderful. The teams were in collaboration. We had fun. We laughed. No matter how hard the day was, we laughed and we did stuff and we helped. And nobody did not help. Everybody was everybody's helper. It was a magical thing, and that came from we invested in training. The the people that would come to the front desk that would catch me around the properties, they're like, I don't know what you is it being on the island? Everyone's just happy. It's like, well, actually, it's a small little place and it's very small, and we all have to leave here from time to time or we go crazy. They said everybody's so happy. Everybody is willing to work, willing to help, willing to make sure that everything is fine for us. We became such a place for people to come to because of the people we had around us, and that's because we invested in the people. That training glows to to the guest. The guest sees the joy of the team. The guest sees the empathy from one team member to another. It's not some housekeeper saying, "Oh yeah, I've been asking engineering for forever to get that thing fixed. Who knows? So sorry that happened to you, but I can't do anything about it." That happens. Instead of, "Oh my gosh, yes, you know what? Such and such is engineering. I'll see if I can get that. Thank you for bringing it to our attention. I forgot that, or that I didn't know that was happening. We'll get that fixed right away." Totally different environment. That comes from training. That comes from the fact that housekeeping knows engineering, engineering knows housekeeping, and all of these things work together. Now, points I want to finish making on to the conversation today, other than always having a plan B, having a way of saying, well, if that doesn't do that, we got to figure out that from this point what to do. Plan Bs or plan Bs. The other is always have research and development running in a marketing environment. Always have something not hidden, but in your back pocket. Things they're trying and doing things, even if it's observational or speculative or just less sampling stuff and variations of stuff and so forth. Always look at variables to what you're currently doing, because you never know when you need it. You might be the plan B. Like, okay, that everything is an utter failure. Nothing's on the board correctly. Everything went and took a downturn. Maybe some traumatic event happened in your market or something. What is that? What other options do we have? And lo and behold, you've been working on this little, I wouldn't say pet project, but this project over here that has been showing relatively decent results. You're eventually going to bring it in front of everybody thinking that it might be something to consider. But hey, I've had this working. It seems to be working in the right direction. Maybe we can pull that out of the shed and see if it runs around the track. That R&D should be inbred into what you do every day as a marketer. Looking at what you're doing, accepting the metrics from what you're doing, but always questioning their value, questioning their consistency, and questioning what other alternatives might exist. That's the training that makes it different. Now, why does this all tie together to Groundhog Day, the movie? It was estimated that for Bill Murray to have learned the piano, to play it at the level he was at, this shows you the geekdom of this movie, that it would have taken him 1,200 times of the daily cycle that the movie is featuring, of just doing piano training, to have gotten to that proficiency level. You figure of all the other things, because there's always how many days do you keep going in the loop, and how many, and it's in the thousands, where to do the ice carvings, to do the medical stuff, to do the knowledge of everybody in the village and everything else like this. It was fun to have people talk about that, but the idea of skill set, the fact that it would have taken him that long to have learned just that one skill to be that good at it, which means we all have a long road ahead of us on everything that we want to be better at. It takes time and progression. As you learn one thing, you apply it with what you already know to the next thing you need to learn, and that grows into now the next thing and so forth, as I keep saying. That training has to be given to your team as well. And as I talked about trust and vulnerabilities, you have to have the ability to let your team try and fail. You learn most from failures. You don't learn as much from successes. It's not that you don't learn from the success. There's very skilled people that do well, and then from the part that they did well, they realize they could do better. It isn't that you don't learn from successes. It just takes a longer path. It's not as steep of a growth from things. It's more of a gentle grade as it goes up, because you're constantly just refining the smaller parts that could be improved from what you've already been successful at. It's when you have abject failure that you learn the most from, because everything's in pieces in front of you. And so you have to start from almost the beginning to see where everything went wrong. It's kind of funny that We have examples of this every day in what we see in the news and so forth. The giant rocket that Elon Musk and SpaceX is trying to launch, you saw them applauding when it blew up. You're thinking, like, oh my God, that was probably a rocket full of money. But when you begin to hear why they were elated about it, was the fact that so many of the original primary hurdles that were much more crisis points for it to have failed didn't. And then what did create the failure was simply the next thing they hadn't tried yet, they wanted to see if they could do. If you can approach things with the idea that the failure isn't scarring, that the failure is actually intended, you push until you do fail, then you can embrace learning so much faster. I mean, for those that do fitness work, and by far, you can tell I'm not one of those people anymore. The muscle fatigue, where you do your exercises until you can't do them anymore, is how your muscles continue to push that line forward in your exercise routine. The same goes for your training. Doing it to where it doesn't work anymore, where you fail and it's an utter failure. You've followed a path of success until it doesn't, then it fails, is the evolution of making the next one even better. So that goes into your marketing strategy, the ad variations you create, the concepts of the channels you're looking at, the perspective of the data you're using, and asking whether or not is it still usable? Is it still just something to be done, or is it something that we still need to use? These kinds of learning processes, these training processes, constantly refine the ability to make revenue. I see so many times clients doing the same thing over. The definition of sanity, think there's another result to this. They do it because that's the way it's done. They do it because that's what they have the allowance for. It's no longer being successful. It's no longer being more productive. It's just being done for done's sake. That's not training. That's inertia. And for that reason, you need to continue to grow your training and giving the skills to your team so that you can make better revenue, because now you have more assets to use, more tools to use, more tools in your toolkit to do more things. So, soapbox included. Good news for next week. We are having the one and only Mr. Edward St. Onge. He seems to have been putting things on LinkedIn that is creating controversy as to his perceptions on some things, and asking some candid questions about some corporate takeovers that we are seeing in the news quite regularly and so forth, as well as some perspectives on values of some things. So we're going to get the brain trust together again next week. I'm going to be asking Mr. Robert Cole. Robert, if you're listening to the show, guess what? Invitation is coming your way. Stuart Butler, Tim Peter. We're all going to try to hit up the ideas of what the heck's going on and have a nice long Battle of the Bands session next week about all of those things. So thank you all for your patience and the delay on getting us started today. My apologies for that. Technology is grand when it works and a pain in the butt when it isn't. Thank you so much for all those watching us: Facebook, LinkedIn, Twitter, X, YouTube, Twitch. Also, and most importantly, on our TV channel, the Hospitality Channel, which you can get on Roku TV, Amazon TV, Google TV, Apple TV, any smart TV, really. So look for the Hospitality Channel. The show is always on the free side. This week on our podcast, we're going to be talking about tools that are training value tools that help do training, teach and create modules that are really easy. One of the intimidating factors about training is it's great, but it does two things. It takes your best skilled person out of doing what they do, which is tough. The second is building the training modules. It turns into a circular loop think tank of what's most important, what should be included, what's not included. Excuse me. And the process of presenting that in front of somebody in an understandable way. It gets very challenging. It's one thing to say you have training. It's another thing to have a good training module or training system. And we're going to go through some tools that help you build that. So if you're interested in that, podcast number 433 will cover that for us. 443, 533. Wow, I'm dropping back 10 shows. Show 443 in the podcast. So with that, my name is Lauren Gray. Thank you for the privilege of your time. And I look forward to talking to you all next week.